Emily was a normal girl. She liked school, had friends, and loved her family. Life was simple, predictable, but everything changed with the ringing of the phone. It was old, black, with a rotary dial. Emily hated it. It always seemed to ring at the worst times, like during her favorite TV shows or late at night. One night, the phone rang, its shrill cry echoing through the silent house. Emily's parents were already asleep. She hesitated, a shiver running down her spine. The ringing continued, insistent and demanding. Curiosity and unease battled within her. Finally, she picked up the receiver. Silence. "Hello?" Emily's voice trembled slightly. There was no answer, only a faint crackling on the other end. Unease coiled in her stomach. It felt like someone was listening, their presence lurking just beyond the static. She hung up, her heart pounding. That was the beginning of the calls, the beginning of her fear. The calls became a nightly occurrence, always after midnight, always shrouded in silence. Emily's sleep became plagued by nightmares. The phone, once an ordinary object, now filled her with dread. Each ring sent a jolt of terror through her. She tried ignoring it, burrowing deeper under her covers, but the insistent ringing always pulled her back. The silence on the other end was unnerving. It was a heavy, expectant silence, as if someone or something was waiting for her to speak, to acknowledge their presence. One night, the silence broke. A soft, raspy voice, barely audible, whispered her name. Emily. The phone clattered to the floor, her blood turning to ice. Fear, cold and sharp, pierced through her. She scrambled back on her bed, her breath catching in her throat. Who was this? What did they want? The voice became a regular visitor. Each night, it whispered her name, sending shivers down her spine. Sometimes it was accompanied by a low, chilling chuckle that seemed to slither from the receiver. The calls were no longer silent. They were filled with unseen menace, a constant reminder that she was being watched, targeted. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, as if trying to break free from their static prison. Emily's fear morphed into a constant companion. It followed her everywhere, a shadow she couldn't outrun. She started jumping at every little sound, her nerves frayed, her mind on edge. One night the voice spoke again. This time it was different, angrier. "You shouldn't have told anyone," it hissed. Emily's heart pounded against her ribs. She had confided in her best friend, Sarah, desperate for someone to share her terror. But how did the voice know? The line went dead. Emily stared at the phone, her body trembling. The fear was no longer just a shadow, it had teeth, and it knew her secrets. Emily knew she couldn't keep this to herself any longer. The next morning, her eyes red-rimmed and her face pale, she told her parents everything. To her relief, they believed her. Their concern, however, did little to ease her growing terror. They tried everything, changing their phone number, contacting the phone company. But the calls persisted. The voice remained, a constant threat lurking in the background of their lives. The police were called, their faces skeptical, their words offering little comfort. It was just prank calls, they said, a harmless nuisance. But Emily knew better. This was not harmless. This was something sinister, something that sent shivers down her spine and made her skin crawl. The calls were no longer random. They felt personal, targeted, full of malice. And the voice knew things it shouldn't. Despite changing their number, the phone rang again that night. A chill ran down Emily's spine. It was him. She knew it. Her parents exchanged a worried look, their faces etched with concern. The ringing continued, each shrill sound amplifying the tension in the room. Her father picked up the phone, his voice firm. "Hello? Who is this?" Silence. Only the faint crackling of static answered him. Then the voice, low and menacing, whispered, "Let me speak to Emily." Her parents' faces hardened. This was no longer a prank, this was a threat. Her father's grip tightened on the receiver. "Leave my daughter alone," he warned, his voice trembling with barely suppressed rage. But the voice only laughed, a chilling sound that echoed through the room. The line went dead. Fear hung heavy in the air. They were no longer safe. The voice knew where they lived. It knew their number. It knew their daughter. And it wasn't giving up. The calls continued, each one a hammer blow to Emily's already frayed nerves. She felt trapped in her own home, a prisoner of fear. The phone became her tormentor, a constant reminder of the unseen menace that lurked just beyond the realm of the physical world. One night, as she lay in bed, fear a tight knot in her stomach, she heard a noise, a soft scratching sound like fingernails dragging across wood. It was coming from her bathroom. Her blood ran cold. The scratching continued, slow and deliberate, sending chills down her spine. Emily pulled her blankets tighter, her heart pounding against her ribs. She tried to rationalize the sound, to convince herself it was just the house settling. But deep down, she knew better. Fear, primal and consuming, coiled in her gut. She was not alone. The scratching stopped. Silence descended, heavy and suffocating. Then, she heard it. A soft click. Someone, or something, was trying to get in. The bathroom door was slightly ajar, casting an eerie, elongated shadow across the floor. Emily's breath caught in her throat. Her mind raced, torn between the urge to hide and the desperate need to confront her fear. The silence was broken only by the frantic beating of her own heart. Gathering all her courage, she slowly got out of bed. Her bare feet sank into the plush carpet as she crept towards the bathroom door, each step heavy with dread. The air grew colder, the scent of damp earth invading her senses. Her hand trembled as she reached for the doorknob. Taking a deep breath, she pushed the door open. The bathroom was dark, the only light coming from the hallway. Shadows danced in the corners, playing tricks on her already frayed nerves. She flicked on the light switch. Nothing. The bulb had blown, plunging the room into darkness once more. She took a hesitant step inside, her heart pounding against her ribs. That's when she saw it. A figure stood in the bathtub, shrouded in shadow. Emily gasped, her hand flying to her mouth to stifle a scream. The figure was tall and slender, its features obscured by the darkness. It stood perfectly still, its presence radiating an aura of menace that sent shivers down her spine. "Who's there?" Emily's voice was a choked whisper, her words barely audible above the frantic beating of her heart. The figure didn't move. It remained frozen in place, its silence amplifying the terror that clawed at her insides. Then, slowly, deliberately, the figure turned its head. A wave of dizziness washed over Emily, her vision blurring at the edges. The figure's face, pale and gaunt, materialized from the shadows. Its eyes, wide and hollow, seemed to bore into her very soul. But it wasn't the figure's appearance that chilled her to the core. It was the voice that whispered her name, a raspy, chilling sound that seemed to slither from the very air itself. "Hello, Emily." Emily's scream died in her throat. She stumbled back, her hand frantically searching for the light switch. Her fingers brushed against cold tile, but the light remained stubbornly extinguished. Panic surged through her, threatening to overwhelm her. She turned to flee, but the figure was faster. It lunged, its cold, clammy hand clamping down on her arm. Emily screamed again, a primal sound of terror that echoed through the house. She thrashed against its grip, her heart pounding against her ribs like a trapped bird. Then, just as suddenly as it had begun, it was over. The weight on her arm vanished, the figure dissolving back into the shadows. Emily collapsed to the floor, her chest heaving, her body trembling uncontrollably. The bathroom door swung open, flooding the room with light. Her parents rushed in, their faces etched with concern. "Emily, what happened?" Her father's voice was sharp with worry as he helped her to her feet. Emily could only shake her head, her voice still lost in the grip of terror. She was safe now, or was she? After that night, Emily's parents decided she needed a break. They whisked her away to her grandmother's house, a cozy cottage nestled in a sleepy seaside town. The days turned into weeks, and the phone calls ceased. Emily's nightmares faded, replaced by the soothing sounds of the ocean and the comforting presence of her grandmother. Just when she thought it was finally over, the phone rang. It was her parents, their voices filled with relief. "Emily, it's us. We finally found out who was making the calls." Relief washed over Emily. It was finally over. She could go home. She could forget. But her relief was short-lived. Her father's next words sent a chill down her spine, shattering her newfound peace. "It was Sarah," he said, his voice heavy with disbelief. "Your best friend, Sarah." Emily's blood ran cold. "Sarah? But how? Why?" The phone slipped from Emily's grasp, clattering to the floor. Her mind reeled, struggling to process this new information. Sarah? Her best friend? The one person she had confided in? The one person who knew her deepest fears? The revelation hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. It was supposed to be over. The calls, the fear, the shadowy figure in the bathroom. It was all supposed to be behind her. But now a new terror took root, twisting its way into her heart. Had Sarah been behind it all along? Or was there something more, something darker and more sinister at play? As Emily stared out at the vast expanse of the ocean, a single question echoed in her mind, a chilling whisper that refused to be silenced. What if it wasn't over?